بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله تعالى عليه وآله وسلم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. We're here with another great episode of Convert Conversations. I'm your host, Kevin Omar Lopez Castellanos. And here we have a very special guest that I'm very grateful has taken time out of her day to speak with us. She has been featured quite a few times on the Ansari podcast, if you've seen that, and she's made a name for herself among the Latino Muslim society and pretty much convert, I would believe the convert community in general. She is a staff sergeant within the United States Army, faithfully serving our country, and she's here to share all of her unique perspectives as a convert, as a Latina woman in Islam, and a Latina Muslim woman in the armed forces. But without further ado, may I pre- introduce our host, Sergeant Lourdes Loyola. How are you, Sergeant? Assalamu alaikum.
Salam, how are you? Alhamdulillah, I'm doing well.
Alhamdulillah. This Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule for this. And I would just, if there is any quick way you would like to introduce yourself to the audience, feel free.
No, I think actually you did a great job. I mean, that pretty much encompasses me, aside from the fact that I am a mother, and I'm from Mexico to be specific.
Mashallah. And yeah, I'm Mexican too, half Mexican on my mother's side. My father's Honduran. So I have
Oh,
two different flavors of Latino. Uh, may I ask what part of Mexico does your family originate?
well, I'm from Mexico City. I was born there too.
Okay, yeah, I was born in Mexico too. My father moved from Honduras to Mexico and back in the 90s and eventually met my mother, and I was born in Mexico. Specifically, you know, La Ciudad Guzman, that's where I was born, but I was raised in Teocuitlan de Corona. It's a pueblo in the state of Jalisco, about an hour away from Guadalajara.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
Anyway, so I guess we'll begin with the first question we always ask for our guests. Sergeant Loyola, if you may please explain in very brief terms, what was your conversion story? What led you to embrace Islam, accept it as your deen, as your religion, and any significant milestones you've made since then that you would like our audience to know?
I feel like the quickest story to that, right? Because I feel like we all have a long story leading up to our reversion. But I feel like the quick story is I actually met someone in the military who's also Muslim. He's still Muslim, alhamdulillah. um, who kind of was that seed that guided me into Islam. Like we never really spoke about Islam, but because I knew him, I feel like that's what sparked my questions. Once I did start to question my original religion, I started looking into Islam, and I feel like what drew me to Islam is the science that's in the Quran, that's been proven by people now. I think that that's beautiful, and I think that that's a testament to the truth of of our book, right? And also something that a lot of people that don't know Islam or have biases, like we were talking about, uh, it was the status of women and
Yeah.
the high regards that the Islamic faith holds women. I find it to be one of the most beautiful things. So those two things are what kind of led me to Islam. Like I said, with the help of my brother. Um, and then shortly after I converted in 2015, my oldest son and my middle son converted, and then I had a little Muslim baby, born Muslim, alhamdulillah. Um, and that's really it. And I've been Muslim ever since. I mean, I was in the military since 2009. So I was in the military first. Then in 2015 is when I converted to Islam. And I've been both ever since.
Alhamdulillah. And it's a very unique, I wouldn't, I guess not as super unique, but like it's something that's not talked about very commonly within the Muslim community because a lot of whether they're born Muslims or like people who aren't Muslim but like maybe try to support the communities, they don't they don't necessarily seem to think that like being in the United States military and being a Muslim like coalesce, especially since a lot of people have like ill feelings towards uh the actions like the operations that have been done in predominantly Muslim countries over the past several decades. So if I may ask, like, w I mean, you were in the military first, and then you
Mhm.
embraced Islam, so, like, I would ask 2 major questions. After you accepted Islam, how did you what were would you say were, like, very common like, struggles that you faced when trying to practice your deen in the military? Because while the military, like Islam, is a very disciplined environment, it they don't not necessarily it as far as I know, forgive my ignorance if I'm saying anything false, but like they may not be as like accommodating to religious environments, or do you think it's gotten better? And the second question would be, how do you deal with the United States military that has a mixed reputation with Muslim countries because many would accuse the United States as being aggressors to those countries, and as because they're predominantly Muslim, you would feel a sense of loyalty towards them.
We'll break it down right by question. To answer your first question about any struggles that I faced after I converted, yeah. So contrary to popular belief, the U.S. Army has been very accommodating. They have exceptions to policies where anybody of a different religion, not just Muslims, can request accommodations, both to wear a hijab, to wear a turban, to have a beard. So they do actually accommodate as long as you follow protocol and you submit your request. They're very accommodating. I think what's different about me is the fact that I was already in the military, so I was able to get to a certain rank um, before I converted, right? So with that also comes the position that I hold and things of that nature, to where I haven't really gotten a lot of negative uh negative feedback from anybody. I feel like on the contrary, I've been able to assist a lot of Muslims and people of other religions be able to practice their religion within the army. So it's something that I've been able to bridge between not like I said, not just the Muslim community, right, but other religions and the military. So that's been great if I'm being honest. I'm able to pray. I'm able to wear my hijab. They actually offer halal MREs. So they make it very accommodating, believe it or not, to be Muslim in the army.
For our audience who may not be as acquainted with military terms, what are MREs?
So those are like it's meals ready to eat. So it's what we get when we're in the field or when we're in certain environments where there's no kitchen, right? We get these like packaged meals and they have halal MREs.
Mashallah, that is really incredible.
Hmm.
And so, is what about our second question, where you deal with being a Muslim in the U.S. military, which has a mixed reputation within the Muslim community? Many may feel like they're aggressors or like uh, opportunistic people willing to attack other countries just to justify their own superiority.
Right. Well, I feel like that's something that always comes up whenever I do podcasts, right? And I think like I said, even in the Ansari podcast was that at the end of the day, like this is my country, right? Like I'm from the US. My naturalization is here in the US. I feel like it's better to have Muslims in the military than not, right? We need to be represented in all aspects of our communities, right? In this government. I think that it's a lot easier to say, hey, you shouldn't do that or you shouldn't do that, right? But one of the questions I asked, I think uh the host from the Ansari podcast was, who would you rather have, right? If the US military goes to war with another country, Muslim or not, would you rather have Muslim soldiers in those front lines, or would you just rather have anybody else, right? Because you know what I believe, you know my morals, you know my ethics, you know the code of values that I follow as a Muslim, right? So I would much rather know that there are Muslims serving in the military than no Muslim at all, right? I feel like it's very important for us to integrate ourselves in every aspect of the government. And while I understand that the military might seem a little different to some, right? It's important that we do have Muslims represented in the military, especially when we go to places where, like you said, it's majority Muslim countries, right? We know how to approach Muslim women. We know how to approach Muslim men. We know how to hold the Quran properly and with respect, right? Things like that, something like that. If someone doesn't know how to approach a Muslim woman in a different country or a Muslim man or their customs and courtesy, right? That can create a war, right? You can do something so bad as a US representative, right, in the military that creates such disrespect to the other country and make things so much worse than what they already are, right? So I think that we're a great middleman for both because we also need to understand that the military is not going to go anywhere, not for the US, not for any other government, right? So it's not like an organization started by random people that you can just like, oh, don't do that anymore, right? It's the military. Whether you like it, I like it, you don't like it, I don't like it. That's something that we need to understand is always going to be there, right? So I think, like I said, for me, I would much rather be part of that and ensure that there's equal treatment, there's equity, there's equality, and there's respect and understanding from both of the communities, which is something that I pride myself in doing is building bridges between all of these different communities that I'm blessed to be part of.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense because in the end, like, see, I am part of a masjid and seminary Medina Institute, and one thing that I try to like always talk to with the fellow people in my congregation or in my class, my seminary class is like I will always try to encourage, like, we need to be more active with our neighbors because, like, they sometimes I don't feel like they do it intentionally, but sometimes it may be subconscious where they like because I'm one of the few Latinos in our masjid and we're located in a predominantly Latino Spanish speaking neighborhood. It's like, oh yeah, we're gonna need Kevin to always handle that. It's like I'm happy to do it, but at the same time, I can't always and like I don't believe they use me as a token, but it's like I can't always be there to bail you out. Like
Right.
it like especially since now Latinos were the fastest growing group accepting Islam and it's like you can't just rely on us to bring the Latinos to you. You also got to put in a little bit more effort to come to us. Like not for the sake of like dawah, like to have a dawah table, but like get to know us as your neighbors because Islam holds very explicit guidelines on how we need to treat our neighbors, how we need to interact with our neighbors. And actually, one of my sheikhs, Sheikh Ali Lariki, who's from Spain and Morocco, but currently stations himself in England. See, Medina used to be more into downtown Atlanta back in like 2015, and he likes the new location where we're at in Duluth, Georgia. But he says one thing he is disappointed by is that we've become a little bit more isolated, not as like had day to day in active participation with the community, like just even with like talking and knowing our neighbors and performing acts of like charity, helping, speaking with our neighbors, providing services and talking. And because of that, I always try to tell the people at my masjid, if you really want to help people get out of like the difficulties of the streets, you need to have the courage to go into the streets. Because I grew up in a rough environment. I grew up in the streets, and one thing I've always picked up from that experience is like when you wish to change something, you can't just like praying on it. Yes, that's something you can do, and hoping, yes, definitely something you should do. But at the same time, and that relates back to the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Put your trust in Allah, but also tie your camel. Like
Mhm.
you gotta if you really want the change, you gotta make the effort to do that change, and then trust Allah will take care of the rest. Because it's that mentality that helps us become a more proactive part of our mind. Because in the seerah, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba did hijrah to Medina, it was just not a 100% Muslim city. There were Jews and there were some Christians, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam established explicit guidelines on how we needed to interact with the other tribes, the other religious groups, because even though it was going to be a Muslim governed city, everyone still required their own voice within the government, how the day-to-day operations went. And I feel like in I feel like the one thing that I feel that the Muslim community, and this is also why I was a participant in that latest Latino Muslim outreach event back in October was not just to like empower our fellow Latino Muslims, but like also tell the the broader Muslim community who may not be aware of us yet that like we exist. Latinos, people who speak Spanish and English and like come from these countries, we've been part of the Ummah for a while. We've existed for a while. And so, but yet some of them still don't even know we exist.
Right.
So if we really want synergy, we say like what I've always told them, you can't just expect us, the Latino Muslims, to bring the Latinos to you. Also got to be willing to come to us to go to them because a bridge insinuates two sides, one side crossing and the other side crossing. It's not one
Right.
way. So I feel like, would you feel like that's the role you feel like you play as a Muslim in the military, and why you would encourage more Muslims to be participating not just in the military, but in the overall everyday structure of American society, where it's like, if we really wish for change within the Muslim community in the United States, it means we have to be an active part of this country. If we really want this country to like treat us with respect, we got to give what we want to receive. You got to give in order to receive. Would you say that's your mentality?
Absolutely. I think like I said, it's very important to be part of it, every aspect of our government. And as Muslims, like we can't shy away from like you said, being with our neighbors, right? We have to coexist with everybody here, regardless of their race, their origin, anything like that. So we have to coexist. And so to shy away from those things or to actively live here in the US, but then tell people, oh, you can be part of any, this part of the government or that part of the government. I think we do our ummah a disservice by alienating ourselves from certain aspects, right? So yeah, no, I would say that that's definitely my belief. I believe in building those bridges throughout all of our communities, like I said.
Yeah. And I would say like what when and besides that, like I also one of my teachers do some of my teachers do agree that that is necessary. That's why our imam a while ago he participated in an interfaith dialogue with at the I think it was one of the Georgia House of Representatives or the Senate, but basically he took it upon himself to give a Muslim presence to the interfaith dialogue that was occurring within the government because it's as you said, we need Muslim representation. So, what advice would you give to a Muslim who is interested in serving in the United States military? Advice would you give them to like help them succeed, not just as a soldier, but as a soldier who still wishes to put the Sharia above? Because like I would like as dedicated as you are to the military, I would maybe feel like you still hold the mentality of like you're a Muslim first, everything else comes second. It's not unimportant, but it still comes second to who you are as a Muslim.
Right, right, right. Absolutely. I'm definitely Muslim before I'm anything else, alhamdulillah. But like I think that one of the most important things to remember, the advice I would give to anyone who wants to join the military and still hold on to that deen, is to remember that when we are in those spaces, we break down the biases, right? The judgment, the preconceived notions that people have of Muslims. Anytime that I've been able to speak to anyone who's never met a Muslim in their life, they're like, wow, I had no idea. Or like, why did you convert? Because they get to know me and they get to know how strong-willed I am. And they're like, wait, I thought Muslim women were, timid and they had to just obey their husband, right? So there's all these misconceptions that anybody can shut down or break just with our presence, just with conversations like the ones we're having right now, right? So when we are in these spaces, you don't just affect one person, right? If I have a conversation with one other soldier, he or she might go back to their family and say, hey, guess what I found out today? That's 4 people, and then those people go and tell their coworkers, the coworkers tell so and so, so you start changing the minds of so many people who thought Muslims were bad people, that Muslim women, have no rights. All of these misconceptions that we know are prevalent out there. You get to break that down, and like I said, there are if anybody's trying to join the military, there are a lot of accommodations when it comes to specifically being Muslim in the military. Um, so I would definitely encourage anybody, and I always do. I always encourage Muslims to be part of the military, and you can always do so honorably and still abiding by our code of ethics as Muslims. Um, so yeah, no, I definitely encourage it.
Alhamdulillah. And may I ask, like, also as a Latino woman, as a Mexican American woman who at the same time also has the challenge of navigating a culture where inshallah, with this we discussed recently about this documentary that will educate a lot of what I hope will educate a lot of Mexicanos about the intrinsic Islamic influences that are a part of our culture. And like I also face a challenge of like trying to communicate that because like my brother and sister are still like very like it maybe Kevin, but it's like it's not our heritage. Like, they're still very reluctant to, like, embrace how entrenched Islam is in our deen, because there's still that conception of, like, Islam is a very foreign concept, but it's like, me personally, because of the connection I felt with when I studied the history of Al-Andalus, I look at Islam as, like, not something that's taken me away from my culture. I look because, I have Spanish heritage from my grandfather. I l and who knows, if I do a 23andMe or a DNA test, if I go back enough generations, I might find out I actually have Muslim ancestors. So for me personally, I don't look at Islam as something that takes me away from my heritage. If anything, I'm reclaiming a lost part of it. So but what are your what are your feelings as a fellow Mexicana of like balancing Islam with your Mexican heritage and trying to bridge that gap between a country that's still not very as educated about Muslims and also being a representative to the Ummah of a country that's only beginning to embrace Islam.
Yeah, I think Islam, and that's something that we all know. Islam came to beautify your culture, right? It didn't come to take it away. So I think that us as reverts, we do have an obligation, right, to bring our culture into the fold of Islam and to not forget where we come from, right? I think that that's something that I would call a canon event, that I feel like most of us, the majority of us go through where we kind of lose ourselves in someone else's culture and we do what I like to call the Arabization. We start trying to become Arab and leave, for example, me, right? Leave your Mexican culture aside because we feel that being Arab somehow is closer to being a good Muslim, and it's not, right? One of the things that I know a lot of my brothers and sisters are told when they revert is to change their name, into a Muslim name, right? But what is this Muslim name that we're being told to change our name to is really an Arab name. So instead of us keeping true to saying, "Hey, my name is Lourdes," and Lourdes is now a Muslim name because I'm Muslim, right?
Yeah,
And I'm
absolutely.
Mexican and Muslim. So I think that we owe our Ummah um, our remembrance to our culture and always bringing that up in the front as well, right? Putting that in the forefront and being proud of who you are, where you come from. And as much as I believe that the Arab culture is beautiful, alhamdulillah, I think it's a beautiful culture. That's not where I'm from, right? I'm Mexican and everything I know and everything I am is Mexican. And Mexico is such a beautiful country and it has such a beautiful culture that beautifully fits into Islam, right? There's no need to say, oh, I'm Mexican, so like I can't be Muslim or a Muslim, I guess I can't really be Mexican or be in touch with my culture. We owe the Ummah that education, right? We always have to give each other something, right? Uh, we do owe each other things as Muslim brothers and sisters. And I think that that's one of those things of being able to represent your own culture with everyone. So we can also stop those misconceptions about Mexicans or people from Honduras or El Salvador, right? Because also in our Muslim community, that might not be the norm, right? From somewhere in Latin America might not be the norm. And there's biases everywhere we go, right? We all have biases, whether we admit to it or not. We all do have biases. So when we come up and I'm like, hey, I'm Mexican, and you be like, "Oh, well, aren't you cartel?" Like, "Oh, don't you guys all," the typical stuff, right? And I could be like, "You know what, brother? Come here. Let me show you what my culture is really about."
Yeah, there's some
Right?
people who still use the, they joke around saying, "Oh, let's go eat Taco Bell," simply because they know that's gonna rile me up. Because,
Same here.
they know it's not authentic at this point, I've educated them about it, but it's
Right.
like, they know it riles me up because to me, it's like, if you if you think I'll be honest, like, the imam at my masjid, like, alhamdulillah, I have great respect for him, but one time when he accidentally let it slip where w about, he think where because, he doesn't know much better, where he thinks Taco Bell is authentic Mexican food. I was like, "You know what Jesus did, Ustad?" I said, "You just insulted my abuela's grave." Yeah, I had literally said that because it
Mhm.
just felt like that to me because,
Mm.
and in the end,
And that's where we educate, right? And we build those bridges between our culture and his culture.
yeah, and in the end, I never, even after becoming Muslim, I never gave up the food I ate. I never gave up eating tacos. I never gave up eating
Mhm.
tostadas or tortas. It's just that it was a process of me and also my mother because, alhamdulillah, Allah bless her and guide her because I consider her my personal Abu Talib because she took it upon herself to be like this bridge of like helping to communicate this new Muslim identity I was developing with the rest of the family because I could talk to myself, but like mom knew how to like put it in a way that our family would understand.
Right.
And it also, she would help me on developing halalized versions of our food. Like, for instance,
Absolutely.
frijoles. Like, that a lot of people like preparing frijoles, frijoles fritos with
Lord.
manteca. But
Mhm.
like before that, and because my mom and I were already trying to go on a health kick because she and I take that seriously, we found a way to, like, get the same flavor with avocado oil instead of manteca, but so when in the first year I was Muslim, when we had family coming over and they were insistent on doing things the traditional way with frijoles fritos, my mom would prepare 2 pots. She'd have a big pot with the whole manteca prepared, but then she'd pull me aside and say, "Kevin, this small pot, this is para ti. It's with, aceite de aguacate," and she said, "That's for you," because in the end, should we make sure that I never lost touch with the things that I feel connect me most with my culture, but still find a way to obey the Muslim guidelines.
Yeah, and
And
that's
it
so important. Like even for Ramadan, like I like to decorate with papel picado. I put like a whole bunch of Mexican decor
and
because that's what.
I still enjoy a
Yeah.
tostada for my iftar.
And that's all I know how to cook is Mexican food. So if somebody's expecting me to cook something else, like I can't. I just cook Mexican
I
food.
can
So
I know a little
for
here and
Eid,
there.
we have only Mexican food here. Like that's all we have.
Yeah, and for me, it's Mexican Honduran, so and my parents have found a way to fuse both cultures beautifully with our
MashaAllah.
cuisine, so, like, why can't I
Oh
do the
yeah.
same with my Muslim beliefs? And yeah,
Absolutely.
like with a lot of converts, I did go through that period where it's like I never made the intention, but like because I was so eager to like embrace a lot of the different
Yeah.
cultures, I did subconsciously begin to Arabize myself. First, it was
Yeah.
like a brief period of Pakistanizing, but then I pulled myself out of it. But then it was like the Arabizing, especially because I felt such a connection with Spanish Muslims, the Al Andalusians, and it's like it and probably it might be something that I'm a part of and part of my heritage, but at the same time, I'm not Arab, I'm not Pakistani, I'm not European, I'm not African, I'm not Southeast Asian, and I shouldn't try to be because
Right.
that's something we always should be mindful of as converts. And
And you have your own beautiful cultures.
yeah, like right here, I'm wearing my hat with La Arifuna. In Honduras, there's a ethnic group known as the Arifuna who are of mixed African and indigenous heritage. So, and there's a branch of my family that's related to that group. Not not my dad's side, but like I still hold that part of my country's history in such great regard because in the end, like I love Mexico and I love Honduras and I recently went on a trip to Mexico to finally see where I came from because I hadn't been there since I was 2 years old. And
Mhm.
while I love the culture and I definitely love spending time with my abuelo, my grandfather, and I agree, the Mexican culture does not go against Muslim Muslim tradition, but I do feel like a lot of the social and governmental structure kind of does because when I was there, my family actually, like, even though they accept me being Muslim, they advised me to, like, just practice at home because a lot of the outside were not as particularly welcoming to other religious groups. And as much as did not, and I had the mentality of like, then I should just be the representative. But like, because I
It's
was,
funny you say that because I actually felt safer as a hijabi while I was in Mexico than I do here in the US.
but in my case, it's like even when we were at the airport and I just wanted to combine my prayers and do that, my mom was like, please don't, because my tia Pati, she actually has known some Muslims in living in Mexico, but
Mhm.
unfortunately, they were not treated well by the Mexican government because they would get detained and arrested and detained just for praying at an airport. So like their
Wow.
their accommodations for Muslims are not as gracious as it is here in the US. Because for all the US's difficulties, we have found ways to be able to have accommodations for our religious tenants. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, and
I've
at
even
least
been to a masjid out in I believe it was either Tijuana or Rosarito, I can't
yeah, I
remember.
tried to go to a masjid in Guadalajara, but like it was in an area of the city where even like our a family friend who was a taxi driver who I tried to like convince to take me to that area, like someone I know who could like guide me through the city and take me to the
Right.
specific masjid I wanted to go. He said, "Oh no, that part of town is like too dangerous because like unfortunately there are parts of Mexico where there unfortunately are under the thumb of the cartel, and
Yeah, like
that was
everywhere else, even
that
even
was
here in
where
the US with the
that was
gangs.
yeah, that was where unfortunately, they had a very strong influence in where my family is living, and my
Mhm.
family lives under that fear, and they had to, like, beg me hands down to, like, tone it down, like, I couldn't even go to Juma even though I really wanted to over that masjid in Guadalajara. So it's like, and I'm not trying to dismiss your wonderful experience of being Muslim in Mexico, but, like, at least in the region where I'm from, Jalisco, it's
Mhm.
not exactly safe to be a Muslim there, and it's like, as much as I loved going there and finally getting to know where I came from, I don't think I can see myself going back there until that area of Mexico gets its act together with like how to deal with Muslims because I refuse to live in an area where I don't get the respect. I'm not saying I want the royal treatment, but like I want the
Equity.
standard respect to be able to practice my faith. And unfortunately, where my family's from, they're not as enlightened over there as probably where you went. So I'm not trying to
Yeah.
diss your experiences or
No, I think
dismiss
that
it,
honestly, I think that
but
that's everywhere, right? Because if you're here in the US, there's certain places that are ran by gangs that you can't go to, right? Certain neighborhoods that you can't go to. So it's the same thing everywhere you go, Mexico, the US, any other country,
yeah,
you're always gonna find yourself with the same, I was lucky, like you said, enough to where I was at, I felt beyond safe, walking in the roads, like no problem. When people find out you speak Spanish and you're from there, they're like, oh my goodness,
yeah.
like
Whereas
so
for me,
awesome.
it was not as gracious, and I'm like,
Yeah,
that doesn't make change
that's
my feelings of
unfortunate.
like how much I love where I come from, and I got to finally see it for myself. But it
Yeah,
also now came with a little bit of a tainted feeling. It's because it's like, as much as I feel free to be my Mexican self over there, if I can't be my Muslim self, and for me, that's my
right.
priority, I as much as I feel like the only reason I would ever have to go back there is my family, because I
Yeah.
really just refuse to be anywhere where I cannot be my open Muslim self. But
Mhm.
I think that's why you encourage further active participation of Muslims in the society because nothing's going to change there until we put in the effort to change, and that's been proven
Absolutely.
so many times within the Black Muslim communities over in the streets. Like when I was in Brooklyn, New York, I was in Fulton Street, and that neighborhood was like beyond dangerous until African American Muslim brothers moved in there and actually actively participated with police to remove the drug dealers and the gang members there, rehabilitate them. And now that when I went there and went to New York and visited Fulton Street, I honestly feel like that was the safest neighborhood I ever went to be a Muslim. I never felt unsafe being a Muslim there.
Alhamdulillah.
So I guess I feel that's the biggest takeaway of this conversation. It's like be putting in that effort to be the change that we want to see, and again take the inspiration of the Sira, be the people who actively create the change of through the power of our faith.
Exactly. Agree.
So, alhamdulillah, I really appreciate this. And, this has been a very fruitful conversation. And for anyone watching this, I definitely feel like take a page out of Sergeant Loyola's book, and if it's not the military, find a way to actively give to the society because that's what Muslims are. We are people who believe and do good. But anyways, thank you so much, Sergeant. I have a good night, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Shalom.
Wa alaikum salam.